With the fresh release of Umbrella Academy's most recent season, there's no better time to dive into the weird and wild world of the Hargreaves family, succeeded by Luther Hargreaves, or Number 1. This family is one with many quirks, and Luther is as wild as they come. He has a fascinating origin story too, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what makes him stand out the most among his peers, his extraordinary strength and body. His massive figure might seem like his most prominent physical feature, but there's more to his anatomy than meets the eye. What lies behind that big body? Why does he even look like that in the first place? And how does it feel to live in a body like his? We'll explore all that and so much more today. So strap in, and let's set off on a journey to examine Number 1's marvelous and powerful physique. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Luther, aka Number 1? Luther Hargreaves' life started out pretty strange right from the minute he was born. Born to a mother who had no idea she was pregnant at all, he set foot into the world in the 12th hour of October 1, 1989. He was then adopted by the head of the Hargreaves family, Sir Reginald, who wanted to train him and the rest of his adopted siblings and turn them all into a formidable army that could save the world. He ranked each of these kids according to their perceived individual usefulness, with Luther being considered the most useful and hence codenamed 1. He was also appointed as the leader of Sir Reginald's Umbrella Academy. Back in the day, he only had superhuman strength and resistance, none of that crazy animalistic body that we've seen him in. Pretty crazy, right? After everyone at the Academy basically betrayed Sir Reginald and set out to do their own thing, Luther was the one who stayed firmly by his dad's side. You could even say he was loyal to a fault. Although he stayed back at the Academy, he was immensely lonely in the massive house and sank into a deep depression from being with his thoughts all the time. Despite his mental state, he continued going on missions, and on one such unfortunate mission, he was almost fatally injured. In an attempt to save his only son, Sir Reginald injected him with a miraculous serum that practically resurrected him, but also gave him his now iconic animalistic proportions. It also made him even more powerful than he was before, significantly increasing his musculature and power. In an attempt to distract him from his newly altered appearance and help him stay focused, Reginald shipped him off on a mission to the moon, where he asked him to keep an eye out for any signs of extraterrestrial threats. For over 4 years, Luther spent a long and lonely existence on the moon, left alone with his thoughts. He diligently drafted and sent regular reports that contained his findings back to Earth. He only set foot on Earth again after he found out that Sir Reginald had died. It wasn't long before he found out that Sir Reginald actually never cared about any of the reports, and that he hadn't even bothered to open a single one of them. Disappointed and devastated, Luther began to believe that he had only been sent away because he was not good enough to lead his peers. And these thoughts took a terrible toll on his self-esteem, due to which his self-confidence took a huge hit. After getting all tangled up in a failed attempt to stop an apocalypse, Luther ended up in Dallas, way back in time. He went so far back, in fact, that he ended up all the way in 1962. There, he began working as a driver, and also dabbled in the occasional underground fighting match, which he always won thanks to his super strong build. What specific physical alterations occurred to Luther's body after the serum injection? After his dad injected him with the life-saving serum after that one near-fatal mission, Luther experienced a ton of changes within himself, the most obvious being the physical ones. Down under, his legs were soon covered in a mass of thick and shaggy fur, which made them look more monkey, less man. His upper body was not unchanged either, with his chest and arms becoming much more prominent and bulkier. His skin took on a leathery look and felt tough to the touch, giving it an almost gorilla-like appearance. These modifications weren't just physical though, they also helped significantly build up his strength and durability, making him so much more powerful than he previously was. Unfortunately, despite all these massive transformations, Luther became very embarrassed and defensive about the way he looked after the effects of the serum started becoming apparent. He did his best to hide his new physical features by wearing full sleeves, high-neck shirts, and gloves whenever he had to make an appearance in front of just about anyone. How does Luther's enhanced size and strength compare to that of a normal human? Luther was immensely physically strong, and his feral transformation after the serum only enhanced his super strength. Even back when he was a child, he was strong enough to pick up and fling a whole adult across the room without a second thought. When he was resurrected in the reset universe, his body turned back to normal, much to his surprise and delight. The flip side to that was that he was not super strong anymore, which was a gamble he would have to live with for as long as his body remained normal and human-like. Luther was also highly resilient, which was majorly largely caused by his newly altered ape-like physical form. Some of the most bone-shattering impacts barely left a scratch on him, and he could shrug them off with ease and sustained minimal injuries, even in the most life-threatening situations. During the apocalypse of 1963, he was even able to survive a massive missile blast without the slightest of issues. That didn't mean that he was invulnerable or immortal though, because sharp objects like knives and speeding bullets still seemed to affect him to some extent.
Everything you got!
What are the limitations or vulnerabilities of Luthor's augmented physiology? Despite having a super powerful, albeit super strange physical form, Luthor isn't vulnerable, unlike popular belief. He has his fair share of weaknesses and can be harmed with the right tools. Take for instance, sharp objects and bullets, as previously discussed. Knives seem to cut his skin and make him bleed, while we have seen him dodge or run away from bullets on many occasions, which serves as proof that he's not immune to those either. So much like a regular old human guy, Luthor gets hurt and bleeds after all. He still needs to be careful of the most mundane objects, which makes him not too different from you and me, at least in this regard. Another noteworthy observation that a lot of fans have made about his superpowers is that they seem to sort of fluctuate at times, making him inconsistent and sometimes just downright vulnerable. This might be because his powers are tied to a large extent to his self-esteem, at least according to popular belief. When he's not feeling very confident or is struggling with negative emotions like depression or grief, his physical strength seems to falter too, which essentially means he's less effective in a fight-or-flight situation. Because of these mental roadblocks, he's been defeated in many instances where he could have easily overpowered his opponents had he been feeling fit and fine mentally. This now brings us to what could be considered the most significant vulnerability: his emotions. He's the most powerful guy in the room if he can regulate his emotions. If not, he's practically as good as useless. This means that every time his mental state is compromised, he's highly vulnerable and susceptible to immense injury, creating a dangerous situation for him and everyone he loves and protects. What psychological effects does Luthor experience due to his altered physical appearance? Luthor's mental well-being took a turn for the worse after the immense physical transformation that the serum caused. His sense of self-confidence and emotional well-being took a massive hit, which ultimately led to unpredictable fluctuations in his powers, causing him to go through even more uncertainty and emotional turmoil. He was also intensely loyal to his father, so faithful in fact that he was more than willing to stand by his side, while his other siblings walked off. This caused him to become immensely lonely and isolated from the rest of society. After his restoration and animalistic transformation, this loneliness deepened even further, as his new appearance would not allow him to blend in with the rest of society and even his siblings. These feelings of inadequacy and alienation just exacerbated his already negative self-esteem. His emotional vulnerability made him unstable, which is why he sometimes reacted very strongly to the slightest of issues and seemed childlike and naive while interacting with others. This could also partially have been caused by his prolonged isolation, because of which he may not have had the necessary social interaction needed for proper mental and emotional development.
Luthor, I can't let you...
Why is Luthor's super strength so weak in the series? Now, many fans of the original comic book series have rightly pointed out that Luthor appears to be way weaker now when he is being portrayed in Netflix's new TV show than he ever was in the comics. It's pretty much common knowledge by now that he was the strongest of the lot as a teenager, having no issues tackling able-bodied adults and performing other immense feats of strength with utter ease. However, this strength seems to have diminished dramatically over time, notably after the life-changing mission that needed the intervention of the serum for him to be revived. That experimental serum was like an elixir and poison at the same time, because although it changed his life by saving him, it caused all of his mental and emotional well-being to take a turn for the worse thanks to the physical changes it caused within him. The new and improved Luthor was supposedly stronger thanks to his ape-like physical features, but he simply couldn't shake off his feelings of body dysmorphia and inadequacy. And this is a constant struggle that we see him going through throughout the length of the show. It's no secret that Luke's emotional and mental health directly affects his physical strength and prowess. This is also a good explanation for why he was so powerful during his youth, when his mental well-being was at its peak, and he was fostering healthy relationships with his father and most of his siblings. He was also able to fit into society by being able-bodied and decently good-looking, and the fact that he was the leader of the academy only helped his self-confidence soar to even greater heights. However, all of this began to change as his siblings began abandoning his dad, and since then, things only progressively got worse. He spent years isolated on the moon, only to realize his dad didn't care about any of the work he did there, which was one of the major setbacks that caused his self-esteem to plummet. Add to this his boorish new look that did nothing to help his already fragile mental state. This emotional turmoil began weakening his powers, making him sluggish and ineffective, even when his siblings needed him the most. As we watch him struggle with his mental health throughout the years, we watch the potency of his powers constantly fluctuate, proving that there is indeed a positive correlation between what he thinks of himself and how his powers ultimately perform. When he's feeling confident and secure in his own skin, he's stronger than everyone else. But you can only imagine how bad it gets when he's not feeling his best. Thus, we think it's safe to chalk up his weakened state in the series to one primary reason: his fragile emotional state. Don't you agree? In what ways does Luther's physiology differ from his siblings? Luther's powers and physiology are markedly different from those of his siblings, primarily because a large part of those rely on brute strength and sheer force, which is probably his greatest strength and weakness. Why? Well, here's how we came to that conclusion. He's less versatile when it comes to dealing with issues because if it's not a problem that he can force his way around, then there's practically nothing he can do about it. Unlike his siblings who can manipulate or perform a range of actions, Luther's powers seem almost ordinary in the face of problems that can't be solved by strength or force. This means he's not very effective in situations that require more than just strength, because if it's not something that can be physically overpowered, then there's practically nothing he can do about it. But there's also a plus side to this, because number one's powers are entirely self-sufficient, unlike many of his siblings. He doesn't need any external factors to contribute to them. All he needs is a little dose of self-confidence and the willingness it takes to do what he wants. That's all. But we still cannot ignore the fact that his powers are seriously limited in a number of situations, especially others that do not need strength. They're also not very versatile, especially when compared to the more adaptable powers of his siblings that can be successfully employed in a variety of different situations.
Luther? Luther?
Luther's body change in the Umbrella Academy Season 3 explained. In the finale of the third season, Luther goes through what can be considered as arguably the most massive change in his appearance throughout the show. He reverts back from his juiced-up gorilla form to his original body from back when he was a teen. Pretty neat, right? This is caused when the siblings step into a new timeline, one where they aren't super powerful and are just ordinary kids. In this parallel version of their reality, Sir Reginald has never been such a large part of their lives, and he certainly wasn't their adoptive father either. And that's because he never met them. Luther was never involved in any threatening missions, which is why he never had to take the serum and could retain the original human body that he loved so greatly. This might have come as a relief to him at first, but it wasn't until he discovered that he wasn't any stronger than the people around him because he didn't have special powers. He was just a regular old human being whose life hadn't been warped by his super strength and the trauma that he later associated it with. This was also a pivotal moment in his character development, as it allows us to see what his life would have been like if he had been exactly like us. We get to watch as he comes to terms with his new non-abilities and limitations and adjusts to life as an average human being with Sloane by his side. He seems to finally be enjoying life despite the dark cloud of impending doom that's constantly lurking over their heads. We see a new version of him, almost like he's a man who's been reborn, a man with newfound confidence and faith in himself. He's so confident in himself, in fact, that he straight up defies Sir Reginald to his face, choosing to walk a path of his own instead. This shows immense growth in his character as he matures from a boy with blind faith to a man who's ready and willing to choose the road not taken as long as it means he'll be free. As we head into Season 4, it's anyone's guess whether Luther will get his powers back or if we'll ever see him in the ape-like form that we've grown to love. This transformation of his is also iconic because it's taken a drastic shift from his portrayal in the comic books, where his new serum-powered body has always been a permanent feature. In case he doesn't end up getting his powers back, we'll get to see him adapt to life as a regular old guy, and his character will continue to develop in more unexpected ways. Most notably, we'll hopefully see some mental and emotional growth.
Yes, I'm Cisco, yes, I'm Ebert, and you're getting 2 thumbs up.
Can Luther reproduce after the transformation? While the series does not explicitly mention whether Luther's transformation caused changes in his reproductive anatomy, there's been a fair amount of speculation regarding whether he'll ever have kids, and if he does, whether they'll look like the teenage Luther or will share some physical features to his new serum-induced form. The show does imply that the serum caused drastic physical changes within him, and while many of these seem pretty obvious, the true extent of these changes is pretty much unknown. It isn't unreasonable, though, to believe that this hybrid physique could have affected his reproductive organs. organs, but how they could have changed is still pretty unclear. To put it plainly, it seems pretty possible that Luther's reproductive capabilities may have been altered or even compromised thanks to his transformation, and while the extent of this is ambiguous, hopefully the next season of the show will lead us to some solid answer. We can only hope it does. Until then, it's safe to say that we, as viewers, can all come up with our own individual theories about just how altered his physiology may be. Let us know your thoughts on this one. Is Luther immortal? While Luther may not be immortal in the most traditional sense, taking the serum to save his life subjected him to a form of resurrection unlike any other seen in his siblings. Resurrection for him meant more than being brought back to life. He was given a completely new body, enhanced features and abilities, and also to a certain extent, the ability to heal from a massive amount of trauma and injury. His strength and resilience have been significantly enhanced in this new form, but that doesn't mean that he's any closer to immortality than he was before he transformed. His considerable physical advantages don't make him immune to death or disease, and this has become clear through the battles we've seen him in, where he's occasionally faced varying levels of harm or injury. He does seem to recover from those without any significant issues, which means that although he can recover from most injuries, he's not truly immortal. Marvelous verdict. And that's a wrap on the wild and wonderful anatomy of Luther Hargreaves, aka Number 1. From becoming the Umbrella Academy's leader to the strongest member to transitioning into a mentally unstable but physically powerful serum-induced man, we've explored the evolution of his super strength and abilities. We've done a deep dive into his physical transformation that caused a shift in his powers and skills, and how it set him apart from the rest of his siblings. His journey has been one that's rife with turmoil and change, and it's anyone's guess what direction he'll go in next. Be it his body dysmorphia, self-hatred, or constant self-esteem issues, Luther is a man who has struggled with the worst version of himself and managed to come out stronger than ever before. Stay tuned for more if you enjoyed this deep dive into his anatomy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!